we're ready. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to this, yeah, I just said welcome to this video. I did not plan this video. I just had the want, the need, the urge to read a poetry collection, and I wanted to do it in the only right way. So the right way to read a poetry collection is with basic water, not tea, not anything else, because I don't even know, in a very nice cup, lots of beautiful rings, a dress that is making you feel like you're a 19th century ghost in a haunted castle, one candle, and no light. Well, the one candle does create some light. You know what I mean. That's the only way to read a poetry collection. Also, you require a pen, and if you want some sticky notes, I will use red because it's perfect for this book. So, On Sun Swallowing is a poetry collection by YouTuber, Instagram influencer? I'm just gonna call her writer, poet, Dakota Warren. This is her first poetry collection, and I'm gonna read you the back so you get a better picture of this poetry collection, because obviously I will not read you the entire book because I cannot do that. I will get sued. If anyone sees this video of importance, you're all important to me. Every single video is important to me, just anyway, I think you know what I mean. Just to give you a picture of what this poetry collection really encompasses and what it is about. On Sun Swallowing is a sweet and bloody collection of poetry, prose, and journal extracts, dancing in the spaces between girlhood and godhood, Satan and switchblades, salvation and damnation. I love the drama, first of all. I love the use of very dramatic, very strong words here, first of all. This sounds so pretentious, but I actually do like it, because I am a poet as well. I write as well. And when I write poetry, I usually shy away from using such strong words. So I always love reading poetry collections and reading poetry in general from people that just have that insane amount of courage that I admire so much. So let's keep on reading. Warren navigates her youth in all things soft, dreamy, and delicate, drenched in gasoline and set ablaze. Her sharp lyricism and cutthroat vulnerability, damn, dares you to haunt your ghost's back. Reminds me of Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. To relish in duality, dismantle dichotomy, and exist as yourself. Deliciously undefinable. Think philosophy between cotton sheets, existentialism cross-legged on the shower floor, cheap cigarettes, even cheaper wine, and an oath to reach hell by midnight and be home in time for work in the morning. I need a moment. I need a moment, okay? What was that? Yeah, holy shit, wow. How does one write like this? I'm sweating. Oh no, we need to be much fancier than that. Wait, here we go. I need a less touristic, is that a word? Fan, I need one that is more classy. I shall acquire one. Okay, wow, I forgot, what were we doing? Oh yeah, sweating because this writing was so good. And this is only the back. I'll be fine. The reason why I'm making this video is because I think a lot of people are intimidated to read poetry and intimidated to understand it. By the way, I don't think this chair gets enough appreciation. Can we have commotion? Not for the dress, but for the chair. I think it's gorgeous. And for the red head that I have right now. Anyway, the thing is, poetry works just like every other I can't ever say that word, genre. You just read it. One thing that I can always tell you is, do not try to understand poetry. Do not try to understand a poem the first time you read it. Second thing, always read it out loud or listen to it. If you do not know how to read poetry, because that can be difficult, read it slowly, read it with emotion. But if you're not able to read it, try to find a YouTube video that just reads you the poem, because listening to the words will give you a good picture if you like the poem or not. That's what I always do. I read the words that I'm reading and I can quickly say when I like a poem or not, because it's the words that enchant me. It's the words that make me feel something, and not always the meaning. When you try to find the meaning in a poem, most of the time, in my opinion, if it's a good poem, you also have to read in the invisible. You have to read between the lines, and as I said, they're invisible, and you start to slowly go away from like the words themselves. But as someone that loves words, I talk a lot. I try to focus everything that I have on the words, on each individual word itself, first time reading a poem. This might sound so obvious, but it really is not. And I'm not talking about, oh yeah, of course you read the words, otherwise you would not understand it. You know, a poem is words. But a lot of the time when I'm done finding meaning in the words themselves, like in school you did like the stylistic devices, right? After I'm done with that, I go into my own world. I inherit these words. It's not the right word for it. You know, I have the words in my mind, but then I slowly go away from the subject, from the poem, and dive underneath the words and try to find elements that the poet hid in that certain work. And that is also one of the things that I learned through reading, through writing as well, to just listening to a lot of other poems, poets, and people that analyze poetry. So if you have no idea where to start, there are a bunch of videos out there on how to read poetry, how to analyze it. I will not do that. I'm still a newbie. I still learn. So maybe after I'm done with my studies, I will do such a video. But that won't be for the next 2 years. Anyway, so I will give you some examples of what I do when I read a poem. But first of all, let's just read something, right? It's been 10 minutes and we still haven't read this book. Okay, what's very important, for me at least, is putting on a playlist that hopefully fits the book. I think I will not get copyrighted for this because Tchaikovsky is been a long time. I don't think YouTube copyrights. This has Tchaikovsky in it, like Swan Lake. And I know that Dakota loves ballet and also wrote about ballet in this book. Yeah, she's dancing and that's perfect. So let's listen to this. Get our water ready, get all our essentials, and let's read. You're gonna see my mouth moving because I'm gonna read it out loud. And when there's like things that I want to read to you, something that like I found really, really pretty or that I might be able to analyze, wow, really leaning myself out of that window, I will tell you. But first we have to sell our soul because it's required of us. This book is so cool. I, by the way, pre-ordered this and she signed it. A kiss and a sign from Dakota. What else do I want? I'm gonna write a poem about that. This, by the way, also does not only have prose and poems, it also has pictures, which I'm not gonna show you because they're her own, and I don't wanna, you know, steal her work in a way. But what I really love are some pages are like deep dark red. Beautiful. And it's on general sale. So there won't be any signed copies, I believe. I'm gonna link her channel down below and also link the book down below. So if you're interested in getting it after this video. Hope you guys can hear me now. So I just read this poem, and it's called The Art of Bone Carving. And in the first 3 lines, I found something that I quite like. I have washed my hands 12 times today, but I still have blood dried under my fingernails from January. I love creating literary illusions, and I'm literally saying creating, because it might not have been the poet's thought of that certain thing that is on my mind right now, but it's mine because I immediately thought of Macbeth. If you're not familiar with the play, yeah, it's about murder, and this entire poem kind of made me think of it because afterwards she says, "My flesh is stained with what we did, and you called it art, and I call it murder." So sometimes when you read a poem, and you think of something, it might be worth writing it down. Or when you're in class, for example, and you think, hey, this reminds me of that, or I immediately thought of this, say it. Say it to a teacher, whether or not the teacher knows what you're talking about, especially if it's rooted in literature, you always get points for that. I, for example, wrote a poem in which I used 2 words to indicate a literary allusion to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and it's simply 6 o'clock. And tea time. Some people might not think about that when they read it. Some people might think about it and then think, oh, the poet never thought of that. Maybe the poet did. So you never know. So what is fun about poetry is that you are able to make it your own as well. So that is so fun. What else do I want to tell you about? So she writes here, carve out my bones like we carved out a heart in the trunk of a sycamore tree, and promise me you can keep the secret forever. Now, every time I see a specific word to nature, which is not just tree, but sycamore tree, I'm wondering, okay, why did she choose a sycamore tree and not a chestnut tree or an oak tree? So, because I don't know the meaning by heart of a sycamore tree, we're gonna Google a sycamore tree, and then we're gonna Google the meaning. It's easy to find hidden meaning behind words. So, it's perfect. She used the perfect tree because a sycamore tree symbolizes strength, protection, eternity, and divinity. It's perfect for this book. It enhances like everything that this poem says, and that is how easy you are able to find something that is written in between the lines, and that is hidden, and that is so obvious if you know what symbols there are. I have a whole book just explaining symbols. There is meaning in so many things, and it's so much fun to find out, that was my dog, what that meaning is, or what that word symbolizes. It's really cool. So if you find nothing in a poem, but you find a specific thing that narrows something down, like not just a tree, but a sycamore tree, or not just a flower, but a rose. Roses are pretty simple, or a forget-me-not, or a hyacinth, and I can guarantee you 100% you will find something that might make this poem more accessible. When I first read this poem, I understood what it basically meant, but I think going into analyzing it would be much broader, and I would get so much more out of it, which, by the way, I applaud Dakota for doing this. There are not a lot of poets and not a lot of successful poets right now that are young from my generation that publish poems that I really call poetry, but that's subjective. But what I mean is, this is analyzable, and you can find things. So the sycamore tree, meaning divinity, but also eternity, and she says, promise me you can keep the secret forever. It's perfect. It's just perfect. And for anyone who wants to write poetry, this is the exact thing that I found to be so much fun when I write poetry, because you can choose so many things and you know that they will have meaning. When you want to talk about heartbreak, you can use the word broken heart, or my heart is broken, but how boring is that? You know? I mean, it's not bad. But if you have something that you know you want to describe, which is always fun. You can always start that way if you don't find words easily. Try to find something that you want to write about. It can be a feeling, it can be a situation, and try to narrow it down. How does it feel? How does it make you feel? What do you think about when you think about that feeling, when you think about that situation? What stands out? And especially, what kind of small things do you see? That's why I do not like words that are so broad that they basically mean nothing to me. I will explain that. Words like love, even art, darkness, loneliness, what else? Sadness. I feel sad. It's just, they are the broad term for something that is so fun to narrow down and really explain in detail and work with. So if you want to write about love, do not use the word love. Try to find metaphors, try to find situations, try to find symbols that symbolize, that scream love, but it's easier to understand. When I tell you I was heartbroken, you might understand, okay, she was heartbroken. But since love and heartbreak and everything that most poets write about is so individually unique, it is hard to understand for yourself. It might be relatable, sure, but I love finding work that lets me dive into another person's life and lets me dive into another person's feelings and in certain situations where I can see things and really visualize that thing that the poet is writing about. This poet might be writing about love, but it writes it in such intricate and specific ways that I can not only say, oh, this poem is about love, but I can feel what love feels like for that person, or what love is for that person, since this term is very broad, since everyone feels different. I believe that's also the reason why so many people really love this new kind of poetry. Talking about like Ruby Carr, Atticus, Amanda Lovelace. It's easy to understand and it's easily relatable because they use very broad terms that for me say nothing, but for others will just make it very relatable and make them feel like they're not alone, which is great. I don't see that much artistry and creativity in that because I just know and I can see how poets, how writers can work with words and make them into art and make them into paintings that I can see and feel and touch. And it's just so much fun. But of course it's harder to understand. Of course you dive into another person's world of understanding of language. It's always fun to, for example, read two poems that you know are about grief and losing someone. But the way that, for example, these two great poets worked is that they use completely different words. And that just shows how unique and special everyone is because no one feels the same way. And it's really easily said. It makes you feel so much more special because I think poetry is the exact way to find out how different everyone is. I use all these very superficial words for me because right now I'm not writing a poem, and poets write about feelings and poets write about life, and everyone experiences life, and everyone sooner or later experiences heartbreak and love and understanding and loneliness. But it's the way that people write and use specific words that you are able to understand someone else's feeling, and not just, oh, sadness, but that person's understanding of sadness, that person's experience with sadness. And that is, I think, what poetry can do if it's done right, or if it's done in very creative ways. Let's just say that. Before I continue reading, I keep talking more than reading, I'm sorry. But I love that. That just shows that I really like her work, and I have only read like 3 poems so far, but that this makes me talk in a positive way about poetry just shows that I already like this collection because I have read poetry collections before, and the only desire I had after reading those was ranting about how little creativity and how little artistry and how little decision was made and was brought to a poem. I always like to call it, I bet some of you are sick of me saying this, poetry is painting with words. And just as a painter uses and chooses specific colors and chooses a specific thing to paint, a poet does the same thing, but with words. And if I see things when I read, and if I'm enchanted by the language, it's perfect. That's all I want from a poem. And of course, analyzing it is so much fun. It's really hard sometimes, but especially with other people, and seeing what kind of genius people have and people can create. It's insane. I analyzed a poem by Ocean Vuong in my literature class, and the fun thing was that we were supposed to analyze a poem and we had 4 to choose from. And I read his and I knew I was not going to take this because it was too complicated. I didn't understand everything all at once, and I was frustrated. I was like, I'm not gonna choose that. That's way too difficult. And then I chose it, and it was so perfect, and it was so much fun to dive into it. And I talked with my family about it and asked them when I was stuck. My family helped me, and then I found things on my own, and it's so much fun. Back to the painting metaphor, and back to me deciding if a poet is like good, is if they have their own style. And she has her own style. I can already see that, which is great, because I mean, I had art as an A-level. So I know some artists, like I can spot a Turner when I see it. I can spot a Dürer or a Picasso, like that's pretty easy. But sometimes I can't spot a Ruby Carr. I can't spot an Amanda Lovelace. And I know I'm naming these names primarily, but just because I have read all their work, or a lot of, a big bunch of their work. So that's the only thing. I'm gonna continue reading. Sorry, this is just, I just love talking about poetry, can you guess? I need to change my battery because my camera is dying, and I don't know how long this video is gonna be. have to read this to you. I think it's beautiful. This is a great example of very beautiful and specific description, which paints, always with my painting metaphor, the picture into your head. This is called Clay 2 Nights and Maybe 3 Days. I'm not gonna read you the whole poem, but just this part. Do you remember when I told you I was afraid? My skin was clay, and if I sat for too long, I might set, harden, bake into a teacup or a ceramic glazed bowl, painted blue with specks of gray, and oh my, is that a tear rolling down my face? Do you remember when I held the vibrating body of a dragonfly between my middle and forefinger? This luminous symbol of a childhood past posed like a cigarette, us staring, it begging to escape. I have to stop because I don't want to get copyrighted, but I'm gonna start crying. First of all, this poem, you can't see it because you don't know where the line breaks are, but I kind of read it where the line breaks were. Ingenious use of enjambements. She has a line break between, do you remember when I told you I was afraid? Line break. My skin was clay. So, do you remember when I told you I was afraid? Very observable, very easy to understand, very, let's just call it superficial. But then she continues and said, do you remember when I was afraid? My skin was clay, and if I sat for too long, I might set, harden, bake, continuing. She specifies the situation. She gives you a picture of what is actually happening here. And this is so cool. This is so cool. So first she leads you on with this. Do you remember when I was afraid? Being like very, okay, I can't really picture anything. My skin was clay. Oh my god. I love this. I love this so much. If you don't know what an enjambement is, used right, the line continues after a line break. Here's the definition of an enjambement. And if used right, it can lead the reader on into believing something and then it going into the opposite direction sometimes, or used here in this poem as a means to clarify and set a situation, give the reader a picture. It's perfect. I love it. It's so cool. This is so cool. Also, the vibrating body of a dragonfly between my middle and forefinger, this luminous symbol of a childhood past, posed like a cigarette. As a poet, I'm intimidated. I'm always like, I will never write like this. But as just someone, as an admirer of poetry, I'm like, holy shit. This is so good. Sorry, I have another thing to say. This poem encompasses almost everything that I love, especially talking about stylistic devices, because I know they're tiring for people who are in school. Stylistic devices sometimes aren't as easily spot. You really have to practice, at least in my education. It's just tragic how much focus is set on studying and spotting these stylistic devices and without really understanding what they do. I feel like all these definitions are thrust upon the students, including me. I was overwhelmed the first time we talked about that. Or when it's easy to spot, which will get easier if you do it more, it's sometimes hard to understand why that poet used it. Why did someone use this? And I'm gonna give you an example. So I'm gonna read the last stanza. I know we talked about it not enough, but this is perfect. Okay. Do you remember when I held the vibrating body of a dragonfly between my middle and forefinger? This luminous symbol of a childhood past posed like a cigarette, us staring, it begging to escape. And you breathed, stop it, you're hurting it, and I couldn't hear you because I was clay and I was setting. And I was clay and I was setting, a blue and gray speckled teacup sat cross-legged on the cracked concrete and peeling paint and temporary insect asylum veranda out front. First of all, reading that was so much fun. Second of all, listening to it was so much fun. Second of all, anything, it was just fun. As a student of stylistic device, as a student of poetry, and as someone who's just a sucker for alliterations, it's my brand now. Like, it got to the point where in literature class, where my professor asked me, Victoria, find us the alliterations in this poem, because I was constantly pointing them out because I'm a sucker for that. It's just so nice. Alliterations, by the way, here's the definition. This is a poetry class now. I love this. Alliterations have, for me at least, just a very artistic and aesthetically pleasing, let's just call it that, reason to be used. So you have, especially in the last line, cracked concrete and peeling paint. Love that, first of all. But can you hear that? The amount of emotion that you can put into 2 words, or in this case, 5, by Dakota not only using the same letter to start with, but also using sort of the same sound. You have cracked concrete. Very hard, very descriptive, very easily understood. What does that do to you? So that is the first thing, spotting, then understanding what this literary or stylistic device is, and then analyzing, trying to find meaning and why the poet used it. What does that do? Cracked concrete. It does not only paint a picture, and that is something you can write in your exam. The sound of the vowels and consonants is so hard. You're not able to read this without bringing that feeling of heaviness and an unsettling emotion that this speaker is going through. You're not able to read this without understanding that this is difficult, this is hard, this is full of negative emotion. Right now, listening to me, I just know that like 13, 14, 15-year-old me would have made fun of myself. Like, oh my god, you sound like a crazy teacher, just obsessed with literature or obsessed with whatever. But it's just so, sometimes it's really easy if you do it more, like, and then she uses peeling paint. Not as hard as cracked concrete, but still peeling paint. Look at the candle when I do this. Peeling paint. I hope you saw it dancing. What you do with your mouth, and that is fun. That is when I really realized how much fun it is to study linguistics as well as literature. The way that your mouth moves. And that is why it's so important to read poetry out loud. Whenever you use lots of sounds that come from your throat, or where you have to move your tongue, like when you use the word the or thunder. Thunder, it sounds like thunder. It sounds what thunder sounds like. This is what that's called, by the way. I always forget what it's called, so I'm gonna insert it here. In German, it's called Lautmalerei. It's when you hear a word and when you hear the word's meaning. That is so much fun, one of my favorite things. And when you have to peeling paint, your mouth literally has to close to do that. And when you say cracked concrete, there's so much air coming out of your throat in such a short amount of time that it literally is cracking. This is getting too far-fetched, and this is, I don't believe, something that you can really write into into a poetry analysis. But I would rather ask you to see in that discussion I just had, in that rant, no, it wasn't a rant, it was a ramble, that you can see how much you can do with words and how much meaning you can put into 2 words by just choosing the right ones. I'm insane. So we have alliterations, perfect, and then you have the repetitions. Repetitions are perfect. They're easy to spot and they're easy to understand, and the basic interpretation of a repetition is always, this is important. Listen, this is important because I'm saying it twice or 3 times or even more. I love repetitions in a poem. She always asked, do you remember? The speaker wants the person to remember. But then you have the repetition of, I was clay. And here again, ingenious use of enjambement, because you can't see it, but she breaks the line off when she says, and I was. Which might not be much for people, especially the people that do not have that much experience with that sort of poetry and read more modern Instagram poetry, which I do not like to call it because I put my work on Instagram as well. But when I read lots of poets that I talked about before, like Rupi Kaur, Atticus, that stuff, I saw random line breaks, and that is fatal. That is something, if you know how perfectly strong in meaning enjambements are, and if you know how much interpretation value these stylistic devices have, you will get angry when you see random line breaks, when they're just there to maybe fill a page. But she uses them perfectly because she says, and I was setting, and I was clay. But when she says, and I was, and she breaks the line, yeah, you could actually say, yeah, she's dead, or she feels like she's dead, or she was not there anymore. I don't know when it stopped recording. I don't know, I did not know that it was going to be such a deep dive, but I found it and I need to tell you about. With the repetitions, with the enjambements, this whole poem has a structure, and it's structured in couplets, so it's 2 lines. They don't necessarily have to rhyme. In this case, they don't. There are some rhymes within the lines, which has a word for it, which I forgot. This whole poem leads up to the last 2 couplets, so the last 4 lines in the poem. It's setting the scene in the first 7 couplets, and then in the last 3, it turns the situation into something dramatic, into something deadly, into something traumatic. At least for me, always. Just so you know, this is always subjective. And what I say is not the rule, but the way that she says, and I was, there's so much meaning into that. Meaning, I was. It's different when you say, I am. Sometimes it's easier to find things that aren't in a poem in order to find the meaning of why this poet chose this expression instead of this. She could have said, and I am, or she could have continued the line and not break it at this point, but she didn't. If you have a great poem, and most of the time I hope that your teachers, or I hope that you read poems that are worthy of analyzing and have that genius, you are able to read into it. And even if you think it's far-fetched, write it down. If you even have one reason why this might be important, because you can even say, she did not write I am, she wrote I was, and that can signify, or be very confident, just say that signifies that in that moment she wasn't there anymore. She was dead, or the speaker was dead. The speaker felt like they were dead. When I say I was, without anything else, you know, it has an effect. If you don't feel any of the things that I'm saying right now, don't be worried. If you're interested in poetry, you can learn that. I wasn't as passionate about poetry in the first 18 years of my life. And if you have no interest in it, and if you don't feel those things, it's fine. It's art. You always have to remember that poetry is art. And just as you might not like to go into a museum and stare at paintings all day, you might not like poetry, and that's totally fine. I can just always say, if you have an interest for it, don't be intimidated by its ambiguity and ambivalence and strangeness. So yeah, this whole poem is perfectly setting the scene, explaining the scene, and then explaining what the speaker felt in that situation through metaphor, through pictures, through images. And if you see images and if you use images, you are halfway there in understanding a poem and seeing that a poem can be great and you're able to analyze it and to write. Yeah, I will keep reading. Oh my god. Yeah, I did not know that this video was going to turn into a whole analysis of poetry, but apparently it has. I'll see you. Since the night has progressed, and I didn't know that I was going to talk so that I was going to talk so much about individual poems. First of all, I did not know I was going to do this video in general. Then I thought, okay, I'm just going to read this book, kind of, then at the end of this video give my review and kind of talk about it, but this video turned into full-on reading poetry, maybe understanding poetry, what it is, what the magic of poetry. So I think I've talked enough. What I've read so far, which is not the whole book, was extremely, I don't have a word for it because my vocabulary is not that broad, sadly. I just know that after reading this book, in the future I will recognize Dakota Warren's work without her name standing underneath it, because it is so specific and I love it. It's very inspirational, it's very intimidating for a writer, because I'm like, I'm feeling so much when I read her words. Am I able to to do that for other people when I write and when they read my words. So yeah, anyway, this is not about me, this is about her work, and it's amazing. I can only recommend it to you. This was just a ramble on poetry with an example of Unsun Swallowing by Dakota Warren. I will link everything down below. I don't know, guys, this was so spontaneous. And it's not like I did not plan any videos. I actually planned on filming one today and filming 2 tomorrow, so the inspiration just called and I answered. Okay, this was it. I hope you liked this video. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up and comment down below what you would like to see next, you know? Just tell me what. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and don't forget to click the little bell next to the subscription button. Guys, if you want to be within the first 1,000 of subscribers, then it's your time to subscribe. I haven't reached it yet. Help me reach that goal. Okay, anyway. As always, just like every other video in the future, I will link reliable, resourceful, loyal, whatever, trustworthy sources down below to educate yourself on the matter right now, on the war happening in Ukraine. And I will also link a source so you can, if you want to donate, if you have any that you trust, that you think are reliable, please leave them in the comments for everybody and for myself. And yeah, all my social media is on the screen and linked down below. And yeah, if you want to read some bits and pieces of my poetry, you can do that. I think it's here somewhere, my poetry account. And it's also, again, linked down below. This was it. This was weird. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye! Quack.
Das wollte ich auch gerade sagen.
You can donate to. Hey guys, was this too loud? I just moved the candle and wax dripped on my hand. This hurt. This was actually really hot. Ouch. Maybe the poet thought. What? Oops. Scheiße. Au. Au, au, au.
Finden Sie die richtigen Talente. In mehr als 2 Millionen bis jetzt geführt.
Hallo.
Mit der Sperrliste. Green Flags only.
I was unprepared. Do you want to be the first 1,000? What did I just say? Så det var kan synge about balancing the scales. Vibrating body of a dragonfly. A dragonfly. Tell me where they went, Colin. Tell me where they went, brother. Sorry. Or here in this. Or here in this. Or here in this. Or here for... Oh my god, I can blow out the candle and it's gonna be dark. Okay, are you ready? Why am I so excited about this? Okay. I hate myself. Okay, let's do that again. Okay. That was so cool.